Sanshin is an average high school kid who one day has a nightmare and strange things start happening to him. He found out he's been dragged into an ancient war in the form of a game and has the worst luck possible. He set out to find answers for himself while trying not to meet his maker in the process. In what seemed to be an eerie hallway, an undead man drew a magic circle on the ground as he tried to complete a ritual. He noticed Sanshin, who stood speechless, and stared at him as well as the pile of dead bodies that surrounded them. The man referred to himself as the Great Kente and asked Sanshin to return his stolen heart. It looks like his last girl must have done him dirty. Sanshin started running away till he saw a mirror that had a heart in it. He touched it, and the mirror shattered while the dead man laughed about getting his heart back. Sanshin then suddenly woke up in the school clinic. The school nurse told him he passed out in class and was brought there. Sanshin looked at his palm and noticed a glass cut on it and wondered how it got there. The nurse finished her final checkup before Sanshin started yapping about how there's no point in studying history and how one should spend their youth. The nurse put in her earphones because she couldn't care less, and neither could I. His teacher, Chu, walked into the clinic and told Sanshin his homework was waiting for him. I guess this is one of those teachers who couldn't care if a student died or not. Sanshin then went to the classroom and saw a pile of work waiting for him. He asked his classmate, a girl named Ryun, for help, but she just left and told him to take care. Quite the unpopular one with the ladies there. He went to the library to try and complete the assignments, but there was no hope for him in this life or the next. He couldn't even find any information that related to the topic he was researching. While he stared into a dark spot in the library, an echo rang out, and he was transported to a different dimension. A weird-looking creature appeared before him, and it referred to itself as Suikyo-sensei. Suikyo then brought an option of cards for him to pick, but he had to promise to protect the card with his life. He said it would give him the answer to the dreams he had been having. A card lit up and rested on his palm. Then Suikyo-sensei left, and Sanshin woke up to find himself in the library. Cho showed up, and Sanshin started complaining about the assignment, and somehow stupidly mentioned the card he got. Chu noticed, and started threatening him to give up the card. Sanshin refused and started running away, but Chu brought out his card, and summoned a warrior named Gien. Gien went on a rampage, and tried to kill Sanshin while he ran. Sanshin fell, and this anime was about to end with Gien's last strike. At the last minute, Sanshin was able to summon the warrior in his card. The sexiest warrior maiden in this world appeared and introduced herself as Shuyu. The fight began between Gien and the lovely Shuyu. Sanshin, on the other hand, just stood and was confused as to what was happening. He thought it was just a regular card game, but Chu told him it was also a deadly one. Even Shuyu was confused that this stupid boy summoned her without knowing that. Sanshin noticed a cut on Shuyu, but she told him to worry about himself. His spiritual power would keep decreasing the more she got hurt. Shuyu struggled against Gien because Sanshin was a useless lord with a really low spiritual power. If he had been slightly more useful, Shuyu's odds would have been better. Chu mocked Sanshin and told him how much he hated the students. Gien managed to knock down our fair maiden and disarmed her. Chu picked up her sword and told her to decapitate her lord and show loyalty to him. She picked up the sword but refused to do that and continued defending Sanshin. What a lucky bastard. Shuyu then activated her special ability, which set her sword ablaze. She aimed at Chu and released it, but Gien was able to block the blast. While she hid with Sanshin, she told him that the ability used a lot of power and she could only release it a second time. Gien found them hiding and released his ability, which created a whirlwind. It sent violent gusts of wind everywhere and nearly brought down the building. Shuyu still managed to protect Sanshin with her body by lying on top of him. It should have been me. Anyway, Sanshin then found a fire extinguisher and used it to create a smoke screen while they escaped. While they hid, Shuyu complained about Sanshin running away. She said that Sanshin was a good-for-nothing lord, and I couldn't agree more with her. She noticed it was twilight and mentioned that whenever she lost a fight, it was always like that. Sanshin noticed they were generals from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. This was the topic he was trying to research on earlier. He asked her why they were turned into cards, and she replied that their souls were stripped and locked away by an unknown power. They were prevented from being reborn and only waited there to be summoned to fight. She must have been really going through it. Sanshin then decided that they had to escape. Shuyu wasn't having it and said she wouldn't hesitate to kill him if he was unrighteous. Sanshin really thought his orders would be absolute. Such a fool. They made a run for it to look for Sanshin's phone, but they met Cho, who had already smashed it. They got to the roof, but Gien sliced away part of the building and left them with nowhere else to run to. The fight continued on the rooftops, and Shuyu asked Sonshin to escape by himself. Sonshin seemed to have found some sort of chivalry in him and refused to leave her behind. Gien didn't stop with his deadly strikes. Shuyu was able to keep up with him as her spiritual power increased. She had started to sync more with Sonshin. If only I could sync with her too. While the fight went on, Chu brought out another card and used it to create a dome that trapped Shuyu. This limited her movement and prevented her from dodging well. She mocked Gien for being a slave to a stupid lord. She must have forgotten quickly who her lord was. Gien took that as a challenge and dropped his weapon while he strengthened his physical body with spiritual power. He then ran towards Shuyu and slammed into her. He picked her up by her legs and slammed her the way Hulk did to Loki in Avengers. Cho gave her the last chance to join, but she still refused. Sonshin stepped in and offered to give up so Shuyu wouldn't get hurt anymore. I guess he wanted to protect his fair maiden in the end. Chu still wanted her to show loyalty by chopping off Sonshin's head. Sonshin then knelt and accepted his fate, but Shuyu felt betrayed by her lord. Before he would lose his head, Sonshin asked Chu to explain the situation with Kentei's heart. Chu then explained that the game they're involved in is known as Soul Buster. It's a game where they devour each other's souls. He mentioned that in the year 220 AD, when the Khan dynasty fell, Emperor Kentei held a ceremony to restore it, but he was betrayed by one of his advisors. It was Suikyo-sensei who betrayed him and hid his heart. Sonshin, being the stupid lad, unknowingly broke the seal, which was just the first step to Kentei's plans. This made history start changing as well. This was why Sonshin couldn't find anything about the romance of the three kingdoms. As Shuyu moved to take off her lord's head, he gave a signal. She used her sword at the right time to reflect the sun and blinded Gain and Chu. She then used her ability to defeat Gain and sent him back to his card. She said that once a general is defeated, the lord would lose their memories, so he didn't need to worry about Chu. Shuyu asked Sonshin if he wasn't scared that she would betray him, but Sonshin had no doubts about her. She returned to her card to rest. Just then his classmate Ryun showed up and released a warrior from her card. So much for Sonshin catching a breather. This new warrior rushed towards Sonshin but blocked an arrow that was about to hit him. Ryun then asked Shusu, who was her general, to locate the enemy. He saw the archer, Susei, on a different rooftop aiming at them. Then a card on Chu's unconscious body activated and summoned a young man clad in white clothes. I couldn't help but notice how weird his eyebrows were. He called Ryun the girl of the southern palace. He then introduced himself as Hakuanshi, a servant of Kentei. Hakuanshi brainwashed Chu and used him to find Ryun. To think the stupid teacher was nothing more than a mere pawn. He demanded that she tell him the location of the southern palace, but she refused. Susei then took a shot at them, but it was blocked by Shusu, who formed an ice wall. Shusu took Ryun and Sonshin and jumped off the roof into a pool at a nearby building. Susei aimed and waited for one of them to poke out their heads, but Shusu attacked him and took him out. Sonshin and the rest got out of the pool, and he thanked Ryun for saving him. She then told him it was just because Suikyo-sensei told her to. I guess she's still as cold as ever. They ran out of the school, but Sonshin slowed them down because he's a weakling who can't do anything. He still needed to recover his spiritual power and could barely keep up. What a bum. Unfortunately, Hakuanshi caught them on their way out and summoned another general known as Teifu to stop them. Shusu and Teifu recognized each other and got into a little conversation before they began fighting. The fight seemed to be on equal standing for the two of them, until Hakuanshi gave Teifu a buff of spiritual power. Teifu then used his special technique, but Shusu barely dodged and got his side pierced. Hakuanshi then tried to persuade Ryun to join him. He started preaching about how she would be one of the ones to rule in Kentei's new dynasty. Another fool who's been brainwashed with the thought of acquiring more power. Meanwhile, Shusu grabbed Teifu's staff, which prevented him from using his technique again. Hakuanshi then summoned Susei again, and the archer fired his special ability. This caused a hail of arrows to rain down from the sky. Shusu ran to protect his lord and Sonshin. Luckily, Sonshin used the force field card that Cho used earlier to protect them. This kid is just full of surprises. The arrows kept raining down while Sonshin struggled to keep the force field up with his little spiritual energy. Teifu wasn't happy that he was nearly sacrificed and killed by the arrows. Hakuanshi told him that he knew he would dodge it, which was why he didn't return the general to his card state. Yeah, right. He probably didn't care if Teifu died. He then commanded Teifu to finish off Sonshin and the rest, while Susei still rained down arrows on them. Sun Shin barely held on as his spiritual power was depleting fast. Susei's arrows stopped, but Teifu had activated the range of his technique and just waited for Sun Shin to drop the force field. Susei wasn't too happy that his efforts were made to make Teifu look good. Quite a jealous archer he is. He told Hakuanshi to remember that he protected him before his lord returned him to his card. Shusu then said he might be able to win if he could get close to Teifu. But he needed water to use his technique. Ryun's spiritual energy was too low for him to generate ice. It pretty much looked like they'd all be meeting their maker soon enough. Ryun told him to run away as soon as he couldn't hold out any longer, but Sun Shin refused to leave them behind. As soon as he dropped the force field, he ran towards Teifu like the fool he was. Fortunately, the sprinklers in the school activated, and that gave Shusu the water he needed to unleash his attack. At that moment, Sun Shin released Shuyu, and she slashed Teifu on his chest. Shusu rushed to land the killing blow, but Hakuanshi withdrew Teifu just in time and he ran away. Shuyu stupidly started to chase after him. Maybe this girl isn't as smart as I thought. Ryun and Shusu ran after her, but Sun Shin followed shortly after, even though he looked like he was about to drop. While they chased after Shuyu, Shusu asked how Sun Shin was still able to summon her. Ryun suspected that he probably hadn't released his full power yet. The ignorant Shuyu was then lured to the rooftops where she was cornered by Hakuanshi. He summoned another warrior named Caillou, who slashed Shuyu, and she fell off the roof. Just how many generals does this guy have anyway? The slash on Shuyu left behind a weird black glowing scar on her chest. Sun Shin gave Shuyu's card to Ryun and asked her to save his beloved maiden. Sun Shin then finally passed out. I was really surprised he held out for that long. Shuyu then returned to her card, but the scar still remained there. They headed out to the southern palace, but didn't know Hakuanshi still kept his eyes on them. The school nurse then showed up beside Hakuanshi, which meant they were working together. Sun Shin had a nightmare again where he was looking for Shuyu in a dark place. A general who seemed to be a servant of Kente appeared and slashed his chest, leaving a mark. He then saw Shuyu in the arms of Kente as he was dragging out her soul. Sun Shin then woke up to find himself in the sewers with Ryun. She told him to be careful with his spiritual energy. But I doubt this fool had learned his lesson. She suspected that Hakuanshi was still following them, so she wanted to conserve spiritual energy. She told Sun Shin their location, and he told her to follow him. Ryun was very surprised that he could move around already while she followed. Little did they know that the school nurse was close by and watched them. Hakuanshi is then seen with Kente in an unknown area. He told Kente they would soon find the location of the southern palace. Kente asked him about Sun Shin, who found his heart, and urged him to capture the boy and bring him. Hakuanshi then offered Cho as a sacrifice to Kente. Kente devoured Cho's soul before he could figure out what was going on. I guess he should have been kinder to his students. Sun Shin and Ryun then came out to a dangerous neighborhood. They ran through the alleys when they noticed a shadow of someone chasing them. Unfortunately, they were being lured because certain routes were closed off when they tried to use it. They eventually came to a bridge where they saw a yellow-haired boy who pretty much looked like your everyday high school delinquent. They tried to run back, but a gate closed off their escape, and some other people showed up behind the gate. They were the lackeys of the yellow-haired guy. He introduced himself as Barini and started attacking Sun Shin. Ryun blocked off his attack with Shusu. Barini was attacking them with his glowing fists, and Ryun said it was because he was an Earth-type lord. He didn't really need a general to fight. I guess he was the coolest guy around town. Barini got past Shusu and put Sun Shin in a headlock while grabbing his cards. He noticed the wound on Shuyu's card and asked for the general that caused it. They told him that he was chasing them, and Barini let them go. He stayed behind and waited while his lackeys tried to lure the general. The school nurse showed up and attacked with a different general named Khan. Baran and Khan were going at it while Sun Shin and his group were almost at their destination. Unknown to them, an invisible figure was right behind and followed them. Barini was still in his fight and managed to use Khan's chains to strangle him. He asked for the general named Caillou. The nurse buffed Khan and he broke free. He used his iron ball, and yes, I mean an actual big iron ball. He used it to attack Biren, but our Earth-type lord managed to put a crack on it. Biren eventually destroyed the ball and defeated Khan. This made the nurse pass out, and Khan's card disappeared. Sunshin and the rest got on a boat and crossed the lake in front of them. The sneaky ninja still followed them closely without them noticing. Sunshin complained about Shuyu not listening to him, and Ryun told him to hand over the card since he's too stupid to know why Shuyu did that. Shusu told Sunshin that he acted the same way until he met a lord he was able to serve. A young Ryun who protected him from another general's attack with an arrow. He told Sunshin that Shuyu's link to him was still weak, which was why she acted that way. That, and he's too useless of a lord for anyone to bother listening to. Biren, back at the bridge, tried to ask the nurse about Caillou. Unfortunately, her memories were already gone, and she had no idea where she was or what happened. Biren then put her on his shoulder and offered to take her back to the school. She thought this weird guy just had a fetish for nurses, and I don't blame her. Back at the lake, Ryun uses a card to reveal a path leading to the southern palace. It was protected by a barrier made by Suikyo-sensei which prevented anyone from finding it. Shusu finally noticed the ninja's presence and slashed it, but the general made a run for it. He told Ryun to hurry to the palace while he chased after the general. He got to the woods where the general used the darkness to launch sneak attacks. Shusu eventually defeated the ninja but got shot in the back with an arrow. Susei showed himself and asked for the location of the palace. Shusu just mocked him before he got hit again and was defeated. This made Ryun pass out and Shusu's card vanish as well. Sunshin got to the palace and Ryun was being nursed back to health. He somehow revealed the scar on her shoulder from when she protected Shusu. Ryun's grandfather stepped into the room and promised to kill Sunshin for laying his hands on her. I wonder how far he would have gone if her grandfather didn't walk in. Her grandfather told Sunshin that it was possible Shusu was dead, so even if she woke up, she wouldn't remember anything. He then mentioned that he had found how to cure Shuyu. Sunshin had to prepare himself because he said it would be a tough procedure that would test their bond. At Kentei's hideout, Hakuanshi found Susei hiding after he failed on his mission. He let the ninja, Mumei, die and killed their only lead to the southern palace. Susei then promised to check out the area and find the palace. In the southern palace, Ryun's grandfather told Sunshin that Shuyu took a hit to her soul. This is why she can't receive spiritual energy from her lord. The ritual to save her involved Sunshin entering the card with his soul. If he failed, his soul would be trapped in the card for eternity. The process began when he touched Shuyu's suspended body and he got transported to the world in her mind. He found himself by a lakeside where Shuyu was having her bath. Of course, he got transported at just the right time. Who wouldn't want to be that lake right now? Shuyu got out and put on her clothes but asked Sunshin if they'd met before. She told him that she was waiting for a boat but didn't know where it would take her. He tried to make her remember how they fought, but she was not able to. Instead, he apologized for putting her in danger and not being able to protect her. She told him not to worry about it and persuaded him to stay with her forever in that world. And just like that, he got to live happily ever after with her. Fortunately, he snapped out of it and told her that she couldn't stay there. While he spoke about protecting history, the scenery got dark, and he found himself held by chains. They suddenly appeared at the rooftop where Shuyu got injured. While there, Caillou attempted the same attack again, but Sunshin released a lot of spiritual energy and was able to break the chains. He rushed to protect his babe and talked about how useless of a lord he was. This made Shuyu remember who he was, and she transformed into her armor and released her ability on the Caillou that was there. A huge spiritual aura was released into the outside world, and Hakuanshi with Susei saw it along the shore of the lake. Shuyu was saved, but Sunshin passed out after using a lot of energy. She noticed Ryun's grandfather, and he introduced himself as the guardian of the southern place. Just then, Ryun woke up from her slumber. Sunshin and Shuyu began training to improve their connection since their power output had become quite a lot. Sunshin's spiritual energy had grown significantly. Ryun, who was there, asked her grandfather to give her a new general so she could train as well. Sunshin wasn't happy that she had forgotten all about Shusu. Ryun showed no empathy since she couldn't even remember him. You'd think this girl could lighten up a bit. Her grandfather took the blame and talked about how the palace was a great place for lords to train. Some died and some left, and he ended up alone. Such a sad story for an old man. That's when he brought Ryun and started training her. This made her abandon a normal life she could have lived, but Sunshin assured him that Ryun was happy being his heir. He then took Sunshin to a door that needed to be opened with a card. It was protecting one of the 9 most powerful cards which Kente was looking for. The card was that of the god of war, Kan-U. He said that other powerful cards like this one were being protected in other shrines. Ryun's grandfather doubted if his power was enough to wield the card. Since Ryun was his heir, she would one day wield the card. But he feared that the power might be too much for her. Ryun is then seen in her room crying about the scar on her shoulder, but she doesn't understand why. I guess deep down her soul hadn't forgotten about Shusu. Hakuwanshi and his 2 generals showed up at the lake, and he broke the seal leading to the palace. Ryun's grandfather stayed to protect the Kanu card while Sunshin looked for Ryun. He didn't find her in her room, but she had already been captured by Susei. While Sunshin was still looking for her, Teifu tried to stop him, but he released Shuyu, and the 2 generals began fighting. Hakuwanshi was engaged in battle with the Guardian when Susei brought Ryun as a hostage. Her grandfather let his guard down at that moment, and Hakuwanshi strangled him and tossed him to the side. The Kente's dog then entered the shrine to retrieve the card. Sunshin showed up, but Susei warned him not to try anything. The Guardian gained consciousness and went to give his granddaughter the Kanu card. Susei shot him in the process and killed him. At the same time, Hakuwanshi got into the shrine and saw the card wasn't there again. By the time he came out, Ryun was filled with rage and had already summoned Kanu and told him to turn that place to hell. Like she wasn't already hard enough to deal with. Amidst the chaos, Hakuwanshi challenged Kanu to show his powers. He sent the spirits of the dead he controlled to attack him, but they were just like pesky flies to the god of war. Ryun had lost her senses and began attacking everyone, even Sonshin. Susei saw what was happening and left the scene immediately. So much for a proud general. Teifu then battled Kanu to drown out Ryun's spiritual energy. Sonshin told Shuyu that they had to try and stop Ryun before she died. He promised her grandfather to help if this happened. While all this was happening, Biren was slowly approaching the palace in a boat. I really wondered what this guy's deal was. Kanu blocked Teifu's technique and defeated him. He then went to face Soshin. Shuyu decided to take him on while Soshin tried to bring Ryun back to her senses. I didn't know if there was any sense left in her either way. Hakuwanshi just stayed by the side and marveled at the power of Kanu. The fool really thought he'd be able to control him if he got his hands on the card. Shuyu told Sonshin to hurry up because Kanu's spiritual power had started to drop. Sonshin calmed her down a bit by reminding her of her bond with Shusu through her scar. Hakuwanshi, on the other hand, appeared behind Susei and gave him one last chance to become a hero if he shot Ryun with an arrow. The idiotic general heard hero and thought this show was for him. Susei released the arrow, but Sonshin was able to block it in time. The image of Shusu flashed through Sonshin's face as Ryun looked at him. She then commanded Kanu to stop attacking Shuyu. Kanu then attacked Susei, who was hiding in the shadows. The scumbag archer began begging for mercy and even offered to join them to defeat Hakuwanshi. Unfortunately for him, Hakuwanshi just overloaded his body with an evil aura until it burst. Good riddance to him. A new general, named Ukitsu, appeared in his place and restrained Sonshin and the rest. Ukitsu used a spell on Kanu that allowed him to steal a general. Biren showed up just in time and kicked the hell out of Ukitsu's old face, which made the spell stop. Sadly, Kanu's body had changed to that of a young kid, and he wasn't so big and threatening anymore. So much for being the god of war. While they tried to figure out what happened to the body of Kanu, Biren butted in like the delinquent he was, and asked Hakuwanshi to show him his cards since he had business with one of them. I wish he could read the room. Hakuwanshi ignored him and activated a card spell that started destroying the palace. He then also summoned Gien, who looked way bigger and more powerful. Hakuwanshi then escaped, but Biren quickly followed him. Ryun then talked about a hole that led to Suikyo-sensei's place they could use to escape. Soshin told her to find it and forget about fighting while Shuyu took on Gien. Meanwhile, Kanu just stood helpless with his childlike body while still having a full beard. Biren caught up with Hakuwanshi, but he was too dull to be aware of his surroundings. Ukitsu caught him off guard and trapped him in a different dimension. Inside there, Ukitsu tried to use Biren's fears against him by showing him the images of a woman. Who knew the scumbag would be in love? Biren left with no other choice, summoned a general that had to be the most narcissistic person I'd ever seen. He couldn't stop looking at himself in the mirror while he dodged all of Ukitsu's attacks. Eventually, his mirror fell and Ukitsu captured him. As luck would have it, our Narcissus managed to release his ability by slightly touching his mirror. He was then revealed as Baryu of the White Eyebrows. That's the weirdest title ever seen before. His mirror was a tool that reflected and sealed away all evil. They escaped the dimension, and Biren started looking for a way out of the palace. Meanwhile, Shuyu and Gian continued their battle, and it seemed Gian wasn't all happy about being used like a tool just to fight. Gian kept smacking Shuyu around like a mosquito until he grabbed her and was about to crush her body. Soshin then decided to be useful and used a tactic where he would call Shuyu back to her card and release her continuously. He did this until Shuyu got the upper hand and stabbed Gian behind his neck, but she didn't strike a vital spot. Due to their honor, Gian accepted defeat at their hands. The ground crumbled beneath Gian's feet, and he fell into it. Shuyu and Soshin left while looking for a way to escape. Ryun and Kanu got to the hole, but it was sealed by a giant rock that was meant to keep intruders out, so they pondered if they were totally trapped and if it was the end for them. Barini and Sonshin met up as they tried to escape. Ryun then showed up and told them there was a problem. She took them to where the giant rock was, and Biren tried to punch it. Due to Suikyo-sensei's seal on the rock, his punch had no effect, and it bounced back. Sonshin began to push the rock on his own, and Kanu joined him. Shortly after, Ryun joined them, and told them to use their spiritual energy instead to try and shift it. Barini, on the other hand, was being a fool and looking for an exit for himself. He thought anything involving teamwork was stupid. I wonder how he survived for so long. He held the necklace round his neck and remembered the lady who gave it to him. She told him that one day he would have friends he had to help. He joined them and started to push as well. Suddenly, what seemed like a mirage of their generals appeared above each one of them. Kanu said it was a phenomenon where a lord and general's souls were becoming one, and they might be the legendary lords spoken of in ancient times. The rock started moving, but it wasn't enough. Gian showed up to help them, and they were able to open up the hole to escape through. Gian stayed behind as they escaped. He wasn't such a bad guy after all. As they ran, a water current came and carried them away. Meanwhile, Hakuanshi tried to summon Kanu as his general, but Ryun wasn't dead, so it didn't work. Doesn't he know when to give up? Sonshin and his crew woke up in Suikyo-sensei's place after being carried by the water. Their generals were all outside their cards as well. Kanu noticed Baryu but wasn't recognized in return. Baryu just wondered who the bearded kid who had no respect was. Suikyo showed himself, and without delay told them to go to the Southwest Empress's palace, one of the 9 palaces on Earth. He told them to go to Seito in the land of Tenpu, and also said that Hakuanshi would be going there as well. Sonshin tried to ask more questions, but Suikyo just vanished. So much for being their only help. At the same time, Hakuanshi told Kente he had already acquired half of Kanu, and he would get the remaining at Seito. Kente then commanded him to crush the Southwest Empress's palace. Sonshin and his group appeared back at the lake with the southern palace gone, and Ryun's grandfather as well. Sonshin made up his mind and asked Ryun to go with him to the Empress's palace. She hesitated at first, but was more convinced when Barini said he'd join too. The trio agreed and set out to find more answers for themselves. Thanks for watching, fellow weebs. If you enjoyed this recap, dive into the next video or playlist. See you in the next recap.